Dressed in aprons and brandishing baguettes, hundreds of French bakers protest high electricity and raw material costs.
The bakers say they are facing costs that are impossible to pass on to customers. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. Law expert says Supreme Court ruling on International Maritime Pact should be appealed. DFA tells China Ayungin Shoal is part of Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. Philippine Consulate confirms a Filipino died in Monterey Park shooting. Gun violence in U.S. claims more lives in a span of 3 weeks. And South Africa yearns for a peaceful end to Russia-Ukraine conflict. After the Supreme Court has ruled as unconstitutional the joint maritime seismic undertaking between the Philippines and China and Vietnam in the South China Sea, an international law expert suggests it should be appealed. Nadine Aguilar for the details.
Attorney Harry Roque has asked Solicitor General Menard Guevara to file a motion for reconsideration regarding the Supreme Court's decision declaring unconstitutional the Joint Marine Seismic Undertaking or JMSU entered by the Philippines, China, and Vietnam in 2005 under the administration of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. The former presidential spokesman and international law expert says the 12 justices of the Supreme Court made a mistake in declaring the JMSU as unconstitutional using as basis Section 2, Article 12 of the 1987 Constitution, which provides the exploration, development, and utilization of natural resources within the territory of the country, which shall be under full control by the Philippine government. Roque says the area where the JMSU will be conducted is not within the 12 kilometers of territorial waters of the country where the Philippine government has sovereignty, but within the country's 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone or EEZ, as per the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS provision that the Philippines has sole sovereign rights. Roque clarifies that all law students know that sovereignty differs greatly from the sovereignty rights of each state in international law practice. Roque says this is not the first time the Supreme Court has made a ruling where the justices can later correct their decision because it has significant implication on national well-being. Roque says if the Supreme Court cannot correct its decision on the JMSU, then the Philippines' position on disputed territories in the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea will be weakened. Nadine Aguilar, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Foreign Affairs again insists that the Ayungin Shoal is part of the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone. Paulo Ramos tells us more.
Yan o, yung bahura o. Ay, yung Ayungin Shoal. Yan o. Yan. Ito yung pinag-aagawan nila eh.
Filipino fishermen are free to fish in the area of Ayungin Shoal. The Department of Foreign Affairs emphasized the reports that the Chinese Coast Guard has been driving away Filipino fishermen in the area. Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Teresita Daza says Ayungin Shoal is part of the country's exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. She adds that since 1995, the Philippines has had a permanent presence in the area through the commissioning of the naval vessel BRP Sierra Madre. The DFA is waiting for the official report of the military and other agencies on the incident between the Chinese Coast Guard and the Filipino fishermen. The DFA says any diplomatic action of the government will be based on the official incident report. DAZA says the DFA is strictly monitoring the developments in the West Philippine Sea following President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Chinese President Xi Jinping's meeting last January. During that meeting, President Xi assured President Marcos that Filipino fishermen could peacefully fish in the disputed territory. Meanwhile, the Philippine Coast Guard has deployed additional patrol ships in the area following the incident. Paulo Ramos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Department of Agriculture, DA, will release a price cap on imported onions and will ensure that it will not affect local farmers. According to Agriculture Deputy Spokesman Rex Estoperez, the agency will set the price at 100 to 150 pesos per kilogram for imported onions. The price cap will take effect tomorrow. Estoperez says it is necessary to set the price because of the rising cost of production for local farmers. 5,000 metric tons of imported onions are expected to arrive in the country on January 27.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. wants to determine why the price of eggs increased in the past weeks. The Agriculture Chief Marcos tasked the Department of Agriculture Undersecretary Domingo Panganiban during a meeting today. He will meet with egg producers and traders to determine the cause of increasing egg prices despite enough supply in the market. The president aims for the government to intervene to increase agricultural productivity and ensure the availability of nutritious food at affordable prices. In December 2022, medium-sized eggs were only 6 pesos and 90 centavos. As of January 13, on the DA's Price Watch, the same-sized eggs increased to 9 pesos each. The DA says eggs should be retailed between 7 pesos to 7 or 50 centavos per piece, given its farm gate prices. Earlier, the DA reconvened the Price and Volume Watch Committee and the advisory groups for livestock and poultry to closely watch the prices of eggs across the country. As per the Philippine Egg Board Association, or PEBA, the decrease in egg production in the country was due to higher operating expenses for breeders as a result of the increase in hatchling and chicken pellet prices.
Malacanang has denied plans to privatize the operation of Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA. Eren Santos has the story.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has no plans of privatizing the operations of the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, or NAIA. In a sit-down interview with the broadcast media on Monday, President Marcos says the operations of NAIA cannot be privatized. The chief executive clarified that Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista could possibly be misinterpreted regarding the issue. Instead of privatizing, the president says the government would do the opposite.
There's no plan to privatize anything. You cannot privatize an airport to begin with. They cannot own the airport. No, a private firm cannot own the airport.
What will be done is to have a management contract with a New York-based private sector group with expertise in the management of large and popular airports abroad.
The group that runs Gatwick Airport, they run London Airport, they run several big airports, that we're asking them, what can they do? Can they come in and help us so that we can increase the traffic through the Manila Airport? And they said they could. And so they are coming, they were here last week and to look at the operations of the airport, and especially since we had that problem in New Year's Day and this recent outage with the UPS.
Bautista also clarified the issue during a briefing in Malacanang. He says the move is not to privatize but to have a concession agreement with the private sector. Under the agreement, the assets of the airport will remain part of the government, but a private company will manage the airport's operation.
Hindi naman natin ibibigay sa private sector yung assets ng NAIA, no? Ang ibig niyang sabihin ay it's the private sector who will manage the operations, no, through a concession agreement, no, which is what we have been doing in 2 airports now, no, sa Cebu at sa Clark, no. Cebu is operated by GMR Megawide, no, although yung asset talaga ay asset naman ng gobyerno, kaya hindi naman na privatized yung infrastructure, no. This is also the same with the operations of Clark International Airport, no. Yung asset remained with the government, but yung operations ay ginagawa ng private sector.
Bautista also clarified that the administration's move will not result in an increase in the airport's fares and services.
Hindi naman automatic na tataas, no? Kasi yung regulatory function will remain with the government, no? And the government will have a say in the rates that the operators will impose, no? So hindi ibig sabihin na tataas kaagad, no?
The move of the administration aims to prevent disruptions like the January 1 incident at NAIA. Eden Santos for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippine consulate in California has confirmed that a Filipino was among the fatalities in the Monterey Park mass shooting. Moira Encina tells us more.
A Filipino is among the fatalities in the mass shooting that happened in Monterey Park, California. The Philippine Consulate General in Los Angeles, California identified the victim as Valentino Alvero, 68 years old, and a U.S. citizen. The consulate assured to provide assistance to the victim's family. The office has also extended sympathies and condolences to the families of the mass shooting victims. The consulate appealed and advised the Filipino community in the area to be careful and vigilant. It also encouraged Filipinos to immediately report authorities any suspicious activities. Moira Encina for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Authorities have arrested a suspect in the murder of a Filipino worker in Kuwait. The government will respond to the burial of her remains, which is expected to be returned soon. Mian Corvera files this report.
The Department of Migrant Workers is taking charge of how the remains of overseas Filipino worker Julie Viranara, who was killed in Kuwait, will be delivered back home. Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople says they see no reason for the body to be delayed in its delivery. However, authorities have not yet determined the exact cause of the murder. Meanwhile, Kuwaiti authorities have arrested the 17-year-old suspect, Ubaid Alamid, a Turkish national.
Ayaw namin mag-speculate at ang pakiusap din ng pamilya, sana galangin yung dignidad at yung privacy ng pamilya at pati na ni Julie B. Yun ang pakiusap ng pamilya. Masakit kasi sa kanila din yung naririnig yung kung ano man, and so far wala pa naman tayo natatanggap na official report from the Kuwaiti side. Nag-usap na yung recruitment agency niya at yung pamilya, yung sinasabi kong in the loop, yung nandoon sa Kuwait, yung embassy officials natin, yung lawyer na hinire, at yung Kuwaiti police at yung prosecutor's office.
Ople condemns the killing. Like other OFWs, Ople says that Renara was forced to go abroad to provide for the needs of her children. The secretary adds that the government will provide financial support for the education of her 4 children. Despite what happened to Renara, the DMW has no intention of recommending a ban on sending government workers to Kuwait. The Kuwaiti government did not tolerate the case of the abuse and murder as the authorities quickly arrested the suspect. As of now, authorities are looking into having negotiations to discuss the rights of the deployed domestic workers.
We will reach out to the Kuwaiti government. Panahon na siguro i-review yung bilateral labor agreement na 2018 pa yata yon, para din magaya natin yung bilateral agreement with Saudi Arabia na mas maraming safeguards para sa proteksyon ng ating mga manggagawa. Walang gobyerno na gustong merong pinapatay, hindi tinotolerate to ng kahit anong bansa at gobyerno. Pero kasi yung pagiging kasambahay, maski naman dito sa atin, highly vulnerable yung occupation na yan. Kaya nga, may stricto tayo sa mga recruitment agencies na nagre-recruit para sa mga kasambahay kesa sa mga skilled. The nature of the job itself is already very risky.
Senator Cynthia Villar insists if there is another victim of abuse, the government should reinforce the ban. Back in January 2020, the deployment of migrant workers instituted a ban on Kuwait after a series of heinous killings of domestic workers Jeneline Villavende and Joanna Demafilis, whose bodies were placed in freezers.
Tingnan nila kung susolve nila, kung hindi, ban na uli, di ba? Alam mo, actually, in the Philippines, may mga opportunities naman din sila, di ba? Oo. Hindi naman masyadong malaki sweldo nila doon compared to us. So, kaysa naman endanger mo yung life mo doon. Kasi iba ang ano nila iba ang kanilang culture doon di ba? Pagkatulong, parang slavery, di ba?
Senator Joel Villanueva says the cases of abuse and murder of migrant workers are the basis needed to create more jobs for women in the Philippines. According to Villanueva, the labor participation of women is only 39%, but more women working abroad. Villanueva is promoting a National Employment Action Plan aimed at creating an interagency council for jobs and investment. Mean Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Over 24 million SIM cards have been registered nationwide. To make the process easier, ground SIM card registrations will be conducted this week in 15 locations in various provinces. Vin Pascua has the report.
The SIM card registration continues to ramp up across the country. According to data collected by the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or DICT, from the National Telecommunications Commission, as of January 22, 2023, the number of SIM cards registered in the country has risen to 24,120,541. Of these numbers, 12,167,220 came from Smart, which is equivalent to 17.9% of its more than 67 million subscribers. Globe Telecom reports 9,988,656 of its subscribers have registered their SIM cards, while Dito Telecom Unity logs 1,964,665 registered subscribers. The on-ground SIM card registration will be conducted this week at 15 locations in various provinces across the country. It is scheduled to launch tomorrow, January 25, in Pasikin, Ilocos Norte, Mualboal, Cebu, Palo, Leyte, Pangantucan, Bukidnon, and Malalag, Davao del Sur. The SIM card registration rollout in remote areas in other parts of the Philippines will last until January 27. The DICT, on the other hand, is trying to reach more Filipinos with the SIM card registration campaign, according to DICT spokesperson and Undersecretary Ana May Yu Lamentillo. The purpose of the launch of on-ground registration is to reach more people and encourage them to register SIM cards. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The voter registration for the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections are until January 31. This is the repeated reminder of COMELEC Chairman George Garcia, stressing eligible voters should now register. Garcia says there is no reason to extend the voters' registration, especially since COMELEC has long advised the public of the next poll. According to COMELEC data, More than 1 million voters have already registered. Officials expect an additional 1.5 million registrants before the deadline. The poll body launched a site for the Register Anywhere program, or RAP, at the Department of Social Welfare and Development. More sites will be erected at the House of Representatives and the Senate. For now, RAP sites are situated at the SM Mall of Asia in Pasay City, SM South Mall in Las Piñas, Robinson's Place in Ermita, Manila, Robinson's Galleria in Ortigas, Robinson's North in Tacloban City, SM City in Legazpi City, Albay, and Robinson's Place in Naga City, Camarines Sur.
A low-pressure area, or LPA, continuously brings rain to Caraga in Mindanao and eastern Visayas, and was last seen 660 kilometers east of Davao City. Meanwhile, the northeast monsoon affects Cagayan Valley, Cordillera Administrative Region, and Ilocos Norte. It is also the cause of light rainfall in Metro Manila and the remaining areas in Luzon and Visayas. Localized thunderstorms have caused heavy rainfall in the rest of Mindanao and southern Luzon. According to Pagasa's weather specialist Obet Badrina, the LPA will remain in the Philippine area of responsibility for a few days, but there is no indication that it will become a typhoon. However, low-lying occupants are still being cautioned against the possibility of flash floods and landslides. Coming up, gun violence in the U.S. claims more lives. The European Union imposes new sanctions on Iran. And French bakers protest high energy prices. Mata ng Agila International will be right back after the short break. Don't go away.
Join the rescue bots on their missions this January. The whole gang tries to find their way out of an underground cave.
Fire in the shovel. Tickles.
Fetch Doc Green and Graham from a faulty spaceship.
Looks like you're going on a spacewalk.
And deal with a whole island of misfit bots. Rescue bots assemble at Net 25 every Saturday at 10:30 a.m.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's get together sa Net 25.
The news continues here on Mata ng Agila International. More gun violence in the United States happened on Monday. In the Midwestern state of Iowa, 2 people died when gunfire broke out at a youth outreach center in the city of Des Moines. In Northern California, just south of San Francisco, 7 people are dead and 1 critically wounded following 2 shooting incidents. Also, the death toll in the weekend mass slaying in Los Angeles County has risen to 11. Des Moines Police Sergeant Paul Parizek says officers responded to a report of a shooting Monday morning. 2 students died and a teacher was seriously wounded. The Youth Outreach Center runs a program for at-risk children. Acting on a tip from a witness, police later stopped a car and detained 3 possible suspects. The investigation continues. Meanwhile, police in Northern California have arrested a suspect after 2 shooting incidents in San Mateo County. The sheriff's office say they have a 67-year-old man in custody. The 2 incidents happened Monday in the community of Half Moon Bay. Details are still unclear. One shooting occurred at a mushroom farm, the other at a nearby trucking company. And in Los Angeles County, Sheriff Robert Luna says another person has died as a result of the mass shooting Saturday at a dance club in Monterey Park. Luna says the victim succumbed to gunshot wounds in the hospital Monday. He also says they are looking into whether a personal dispute led to the massacre. The gunman, 72-year-old Hu Can Tran, died Sunday of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. They found a cache of weapons and ammunition during a search of Tran's home. Luna says Tran had been arrested in 1994 for unlawful possession of a firearm. Diplomatic relations between Moscow and Estonia have been downgraded as Moscow expels the Estonian ambassador. This is the first time Russia expels an ambassador of a European country since its armed conflict with Ukraine started nearly a year ago. The diplomatic bad blood stems from Estonia's move to reduce staffing levels at Russia's embassy in Tallinn. Moscow is also angered by Estonia's support of Ukraine and its call for Western countries to send tanks to Kyiv to counter Russia's offensive. In a statement, Moscow accuses Estonia of Russia-phobia and the cultivation of hostility toward Russia. The Baltic country was once part of the Soviet Union and has had difficult relations with Russia for years. Estimates by Germany's economy ministry say Berlin is still years from substituting Russian pipeline gas imports with liquefied natural gas capacities. But Chancellor Olaf Scholz insists Germany has learned its lesson from being too dependent on Russia. He says they are now looking into building a capacity that gives Germany as much gas as before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But Berlin's economy minister dismisses Scholz's goal. He clarifies that it will take until 2026 for the country to install 56 billion cubic meters of domestic LNG import capacity. So far, Germany reduced its dependency on Russia by cutting overall usage, importing LNG through neighboring European countries, and adding pipeline deliveries from Norway and the Netherlands. South Africa hopes the Russia-Ukraine conflict will soon be brought to a peaceful end through diplomatic talks. A continental powerhouse, South Africa has refused to denounce Russia's invasion of Ukraine. South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor says they will always support a peaceful resolution of conflicts. She also insists diplomacy or dialogue is the only path to peace.
It is important, therefore, that I mention on behalf of South Africa our sincere wish that the conflict currently between Russia and Ukraine will soon be brought to a peaceful end through diplomacy and negotiation, as we believe this is the desire of all of us in the globe.
Recently, South Africa assumed the BRICS chairmanship, a grouping that includes Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Yet some accuse the Pretoria of government of having abandoned its neutral stance. However, Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow, Beijing, and Pretoria's naval exercises do not contravene any international law.
По военно-морским учениям, готовым тут даже комментировать нечего, 3 суверенных страны, не нарушая никаких норм международного права, проводят учения, ну, я не понимаю, у кого они могут вызвать, как вы сказали, смешанную реакцию, ну, наверное, у наших американских коллег. Американские коллеги считают, что учения по всему миру могут проводить только они.
Lavrov also reiterates that Moscow did not refuse negotiations with Kyiv. Kremlin officials have blamed the closure of diplomatic channels on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Kyiv leader previously said he will not negotiate while Russian leader Vladimir Putin is in power.
The European Union is imposing new sanctions on Iran over Tehran's bloody crackdown on protesters. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell announces the fourth round of sanctions. This includes measures against Iranian officials and entities.
Another 37 responsible, listing another 37 responsible for this crackdown. This includes high-level figures of the media, political personnel, and also responsible from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Demonstrations have swept Iran since the death of Mahsa Amini in the middle of September. She died after being detained by Iran's morality police for a dress code violation. Iranian authorities have executed 4 people for their role in the unrest and imposed the death penalty on 18 others.
The United States and Israel launched a massive joint military exercise to warn adversaries like Iran. General Michael Kurilla says this is to send a message to other countries that Washington is not distracted by the war in Ukraine and threat of China. He asserts that Juniper Oak 3 is also the most significant exercise between the United States and Israel to date. He says the joint exercise improves their interoperability and enhances their ability to respond to contingencies. He also maintains the event is to underscore Washington's commitment to the Middle East.
Anti-government protests in Peru continue with another mass rally planned for today. Interior Minister Vincente Romero says he is working with the Defense Ministry to try to resolve things. But he admits despite the government declaring a state of emergency, the demonstrations will continue. Protesters are demanding the resignation of President Dina Boluarte, a fresh elections, and a new constitution. Romero blames a faceless group for financing the protests. Authorities have long claimed that drug traffickers and illegal miners were manipulating the protesters. The demonstrations have been violent, claiming at least 46 lives. And the country's lucrative tourism industry has been all but shut down because of the unrest. The trouble first broke out in early December when then-President Pedro Castillo was arrested. He was charged with rebellion after trying to dissolve Congress and rule by decree. Since then, his supporters have staged regular protests throughout the country.
As workers man picket lines, the London Ambulance Service advises people to call the 999 emergency number only in life-threatening situations. And they warn people they may have to arrange their own transportation to the hospital. The strike is yet another demonstration in escalating action by unions. They are calling on the government to hold talks on improving pay and working conditions. This latest strike comes ahead of mass walkouts planned for February 6th by both nurses and ambulance staff. Union leaders say they are frustrated by the government's inaction. They say Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is missing in action and needs to be more involved.
Bakers in France turn off their ovens and take to the streets of Paris to protest high energy and raw material costs. Dressed in aprons and brandishing baguettes, hundreds of bakers marched through Paris. The protest is yet another sign of the anger and incomprehension people are feeling over rising costs or prices as a result of several factors: the war in Ukraine, the pandemic, and supply chain issues. Bakers have already been struggling with higher prices for butter, flour, and eggs. The final straw is the annual renewal of their electricity contracts. Power bills go up 600% in some cases. Many bakers say they will simply go out of business. They say they cannot afford to keep their bakery doors open.
The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has approved emergency aid of $105 million for Haiti. The country has long been mired in a humanitarian crisis that has been exacerbated by global inflation. IMF Deputy Managing Director Antoinette Saye says the funds will assist those most affected by high food prices through feeding programs, cash, and in-kind transfers to vulnerable households. The money will be dispersed through the IMF's food shop window, which opened at the end of September. The program gives rapid access to emergency funds to states facing food insecurity, particularly in the event of unexpected shocks in the import of grains or a sudden rise in prices. The IMF says Haiti is experiencing a humanitarian crisis due to economic spillovers from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It adds the Caribbean nation also faces a health crisis from a cholera epidemic and serious security problems.
Pakistan's energy minister reports the national power grid has been restored a day after a massive outage. Monday's nationwide breakdown left most of the country's 220 million people without electricity. It cost tens of millions of dollars in industry losses. School students began their day with battery-powered lights, but they soon ran out of juice. That left pupils studying in the dark. Most hospitals were able to cope because they have generators, but shopkeepers found themselves frustrated without power. One store owner says he was not able to demonstrate electronic products. His potential customers chose not to buy without being able to test them first. Another retailer feared his dairy stock would spoil before the power came back on. The outage started at around 7:30 Monday morning. It stemmed from a failed cost-cutting measure as the country grapples with an economic crisis. Energy Minister Khurram Dastgir Khan says the grid was repaired around 5:15 Tuesday morning. He adds load shedding would continue over the next 2 days as coal and nuclear plants are brought back online.
Up next, the WHO says 5 billion people are at risk of heart disease because of trans fat. Ghislaine Maxwell claims Jeffrey Epstein was murdered in jail. And Thai police have seized 1.1 tons of crystal meth in under a week. Please stay tuned. Mata ng Agila International will be right back.
Susunod sa Counterpoint, ang bagong muka ng pagbabalita ng Net25 News. Kikilalanin.
If ever I'm gonna go back, gusto ko po yung something na talagang I will be proud to be a part of.
Kasama si Attorney Sal Panelo at multi-awarded broadcast journalist Ricky Matay.
Hindi ko palalagpasin ang pagkakataong ito, attorney. I want to ask you.
Sa Counterpoint, Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito sa Net25.
This is the first time I'm actually gonna reveal it.
This
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, pushes to make the COVID-19 vaccination an annual shot. This means that Americans would no longer have to keep track of how many shots they have received or how many months it has been since their last booster. FDA's proposal aims to protect most adults and children against the mutating virus. Reports say the idea comes as COVID boosters have become a heart shell or a heart cell. While more than 80% of the U.S. population has had at least one vaccine dose, only 16% of those eligible have received the latest boosters authorized last August. Under FDA's proposal, the agency, independent experts, and manufacturers would decide annually on which strains to target by the early summer. This would allow COVID vaccine makers to produce and launch updated shots before the fall. FDA says the same method is also used to select the strains for the annual flu shot. The agency will also convene with its panel of outside vaccine experts this Thursday to weigh in on their proposal.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is in Zambia on a number of engagements with the Zambian government officials. She is touring U.S.-Zambian joint projects there. Yellen underscores health security as a key pillar of the partnership between Zambia and the United States over the past 2 decades.
We continue to broaden that partnership. It's important to sustainably finance our public health institutions since the cost of preparedness pales in comparison to the human and economic cost of future health threats. And we all saw this firsthand with COVID-19. Centers like this serve as hubs for better coordinating the preparation, response, and recovery for public health emergencies. And they play an important role in early warning systems to help detect and stop outbreaks.
The World Health Organization has urged immediate and concerted action against contaminated cough medicines. Reports say more than 300 children, mainly aged under 5, in Gambia, Indonesia, and Uzbekistan died of acute kidney injury. These child deaths were associated with contaminated cough syrups. The WHO says the over-the-counter cough syrups had high levels of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. The UN Health Agency also said that the Philippines, Timor-Leste, Senegal, and Cambodia may be potentially impacted since they may have the medicines on sale. The bloc called for action across its 194 member states to prevent more deaths.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, is stepping up its war on trans fat. The WHO says these toxic fats are putting 5 billion people at a higher risk of developing heart disease. The fats are found in packaged foods, baked goods, cooking oils, and spreads like margarine. The solidified oil clogs up the arteries around the heart. 5 years ago, the WHO issued an appeal for industrially produced fatty acids in foods to be eliminated by 2023. So far, 43 countries with a combined population of 2.8 billion people have complied. The agency's Nutrition and Food Safety Chief, Francesco Branca, says billions of people are still consuming these fats.
Fresh. You can fill them down there, whatever you want. There's a refrigerator. We need to cover an additional 5 billion people. They're mainly people living in low and middle income countries. There is a concern that some countries particularly have a high exposure to trans fat. We know of countries such as Egypt, Pakistan. So they are actively also considering the establishment of legislation.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has a warning regarding the country's low birth rate. The nation is on the brink of being unable to maintain social functions. Kishida, who is contending with low approval ratings, was making a major policy speech on the opening day of a 150-day regular parliament session. One of the core elements of his 45-minute speech was about child rearing support. This follows the first time birth rates fell below 800,000, as reported last year. Similar to other Asian nations, fewer births equate to Japan's shrinking labor force. It puts pressure on a social security system that has to support a graying population. The Prime Minister proposed 3 key platforms: economic support, child care services, and working style reform. These would be presented in June to double the child care budget in the future. Kishida also vowed to allow everyone to participate in child rearing regardless of age and gender, adding that he would thoroughly listen to the voices of parents, young people, and child care services providers. U.S. Customs officials are cracking down on egg smugglers. Customs and Border Protection spokesman Roger Mayer says more Americans are crossing into Mexico to sneak cartons of cheaper raw eggs. A border report states the number of egg smuggling incidents jumped more than 100% during the final 3 months of 2022. The price for a 30-count carton of eggs in Mexico is only $3.40. However, a dozen eggs in the U.S. costs $4.25. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, says raw eggs from Mexico have been banned from entering the border since 2012. Mayor also states federal law prohibits travelers from bringing eggs and live chickens into the U.S. since they may carry plant pests and foreign animal diseases. In a tweet, a field operations director in San Diego says they noticed an increase in the number of eggs intercepted at their ports. U.S. Customs officials say failure to declare agricultural items can carry fines of up to $10,000. Supervisory Agriculture Specialist Charles Payne explains they don't want to issue penalties and there would be no issues if travelers declare what they carry. However, reports say customs officials will still confiscate the eggs and have them destroyed, but will waive the penalty for the offender. Egg prices in the U.S. have surged due to a growing consumer demand, along with a decrease in domestic egg supplies. News sources say an avian flu epidemic devastated U.S. poultry flocks, and nearly 58 million birds have been infected with the disease. In the United States, dozens of House Democrats have proposed legislation that would eliminate the debt ceiling, which would allow the government to borrow without any limits set by Congress. The federal government hit the $31 trillion debt ceiling last week. House Republicans are pushing for commitments to cut back on the record growth in federal spending, a deal they want before agreeing to allow more borrowing. But Democrats accuse Republicans of setting up the possibility of prohibiting a debt ceiling hike. This would make the government unable to fund all of its current obligations. Democrats say a better idea is to eliminate all limits on federal borrowing. They push to allow the government to borrow whatever it needs. Convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell has claimed Jeffrey Epstein was murdered in prison in an interview with a British broadcaster that aired on Monday. Maxwell is imprisoned in a Florida penitentiary after her conviction. She serves a 20-year sentence for helping Epstein sexually abuse girls. Epstein faced charges of trafficking underage girls for sex. He escaped trial by killing himself in a New York jail in August of 2019. The autopsy concluded suicide by hanging, although the 66-year-old's sudden death fueled widespread controversy and conspiracy theories. In an interview with Britain's Talk TV, Maxwell says she believes Epstein was murdered. She adds she was shocked and wondered how it happened. 2 prison guards on duty admitted to falsifying records related to the night he died. They were charged later in 2019 over their alleged failure to monitor him. But federal prosecutors dismissed the charges in late 2021 after the pair completed community service work as part of an earlier legal agreement. Foreign Ministry spokesman Arindam Bagchi has criticized the BBC for broadcasting a propaganda piece on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. BBC's documentary centers on accusations that Modi's government discriminates against Muslims. It also claims that Modi may have played a role in instigating ethnic riots in 2002. Bagchi says the documentary is designed to push a particular discredited narrative. He also accuses BBC of having a colonial mindset and questions the purpose and agenda of their 2-part film. India's Supreme Court cleared Modi of any involvement in the 2002 massacre. Thai police officers say they have seized 1.1 tons of crystal methamphetamine in less than a week. Authorities arrested 10 Thai nationals in a series of raids in the north and south of the kingdom. Records show the country has seen a surge in drug smuggling after its borders reopened. Deputy National Police Chief Chinapat Sarasin confirms that some of the smuggled drugs were kept for a long time before dealers shipped them to other countries.
รวมกันหมดนะครับทั้งเราจับที่ทางภาคเหนือภาคกลางแล้วก็ภาคใต้นะครับที่ของกลางที่เข้ามาเนี่ยมันก็ทยอยกันเข้ามาเนี่ยบางแห่งบางทีก็ไปเก็บไว้ก่อนแล้วก็มาถึงพร้อมๆแล้วก็นำลำเลียงออกลงไปสู่ชายแดนภาคใต้ที่อาจจะไปประเทศที่3ต่อไปเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยประเทศไทยเป็นประเทศที่จะต้องผ่านประเทศไทยแน่นอนอยู่แล้วเพราะว่าแหล่งผลิตมันอยู่รอบข้างประเทศไทยเนี่ยที่จะมานะครับส่วนที่จะถามว่า
Sarasin says Taiwan is one of the destinations of the drug. He adds that they are not working with Taipei authorities.
Coming right up, Spotify will cut its staff as soon as this week. Magda Linette will play in her first Grand Slam quarterfinal at the Australian Open. And Jeff Bezos reportedly has plans to sell the Washington Post to buy an NFL team.
So those choices could be very challenging.
These stories and more when Matang Agila International returns.
Hello mga suki! Year 2 na nga ng paborito nating morning habit. Ang ASPN! Kaya naman asahan ang double up na good vibes.
My partner in crime! Ilan ang guess natin? 100?
102. Or 3. Tumpak ka dyan. Oo, tumpak ka dyan.
Mas pinalawak na pagbabalita at mas mainit na talakayan.
Ano na po ang nangyari these past decades? Was there a way for you to verify?
Kasama pa rin ang smart at pretty nanays ng ASPN. Ali Soto at Pat P. Daza. Dito lamang sa Ano sa Palagay Nyo? Lunes hanggang Biyernes, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Dito lang sa Net 25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's get together sa Net 25.
Init, hindi ka pa?
Oo, mag-order ka na.
Sige, order ka na. CR lang ako
Uy, Pisoy!
Oh, kanina ka pa?
Kakarating ko lang. Tara, order tayo. Nagugutom na ako.
Sige. Insan! Oo, kamusta, Insan? Jessie?
Anton? Magkakilala kayo?
Susunod sa Counterpoint, ang bagong muka ng pagbabalita ng Net25 News. Kikilalanin.
If ever I'm gonna go back, gusto ko po yung something na talagang I will be proud to be a part of.
Kasama si Attorney Sal Panelo at multi-awarded broadcast journalist Ricky Matay.
Hindi ko palalagpasin ang pagkakataong ito, attorney. I want to ask you.
Sa Counterpoint, Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito sa Net25.
This is the first time I'm actually gonna reveal it.
The lending unit of crypto firm Genesis has filed for U.S. bankruptcy protection from creditors. Genesis lending unit says it had both assets and liabilities in the range of $1 billion to $10 billion. Genesis Global Holdco, the parent company of Genesis Global Capital, also filed for bankruptcy protection along with another lending unit, Genesis Asia Pacific. The lending unit explains they would contemplate negotiate a potential sale or an equitization transaction to pay creditors. The group also says they had $150 million in cash to support the restructuring. They also clarify that Genesis derivatives and spot trading, broker-dealer and custody businesses are not part of the bankruptcy process. Genesis's bankruptcy filing is the latest in a cascade of crypto failures and steep job cuts triggered by plunging prices last year.
Swedish music streaming company Spotify is planning to announce layoffs in a bid to cut costs. The job cuts are expected to be announced this week following the firing of 38 staff members from Spotify's Gimlet Media and Parcast Studios last October. Back in the third quarter of 2022, Spotify had around 9,800 employees. Meanwhile, the company reported a net loss of 166 million euros in the third quarter. The company's last regulatory filing indicates losses due to higher personnel costs. This following its boosted global advertisement sales team, investment in acquisitions, higher advertising costs, and currency fluctuations.
Magdalena says she could not believe it as she reached her first Grand Slam quarterfinal. It was a shock defeat for Caroline Garcia at the Australian Open on Monday. The 45th ranked Pole outfought the French fourth seed by 7-6, 7-3, and 6-4, making her opponent fall in Melbourne. Lynette says she had never moved forward past the third round at the Australian Open. However, her latest 2-hour and 10-minute battle, which she started confidently, secured her chance to win the game. During a tiebreaker, Lynette only recorded 8 unforced errors in the entire set against Garcia's 19 unforced errors. The 30-year-old player admitted she stayed composed throughout the first set. She managed to come back again on the succeeding sets in order to bag the title.
Amazon founder Jeff Bezos might sell American newspaper The Washington Post to buy the football team Washington Commanders, according to the New York Post. A recent report says 2 buyers intend to seal a deal to acquire the Washington Post. The first logical suitor intends to submit a proposal, while the second buyer claims to have rumors that the publication might still be for sale. However, both spokespersons of Bezos and the Journal said the Washington Post is not for sale. Back in 2013, Bezos bought the Washington Post for $250 million to secure financial stability and online expansion. At one time, Bezos claimed that football is his favorite sport. He has not confirmed whether he would like to add a National Football League team to his portfolio.
And now to help you go through this week, here's a quote from General George Patton, Jr., a general of the United States Army. Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. You have to allow for creativity, right? We do things differently.
Yes, and trust is a big thing. You have to trust people that they can do things the way that they can based on their given gifts.
You have to learn to delegate, right?
Delegate. Teach men how to fish.
That's true. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Rich Yelago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.